This is episode 25 of the Life in Norway show. Regular listeners will know I recently took a trip to Svalbard. I stayed in Longyearbyen, the world's northernmost permanently inhabited community, which around 2,000 people call their home. One of those people is Ben Vidmar, an American who moved to Svalbard several years ago. He now works as a chef and a food entrepreneur. He has his own business, Polar Permaculture. Ben is trying to achieve the impossible by growing fresh food in an Arctic desert. It's a fascinating story. You can learn more about Ben and everything we talk about on today's show on the show notes page. Simply head on over to lifeinnorway.net/podcast and look for episode 25. Happy listening. I'd like to welcome Ben Vidmar to the Life in Norway show. Ben, I'll let you introduce yourself because you have quite the story to tell.
Hi, my name is Ben Vidmar and I'm living here in Svalbard. I've been here since 2008. I'm actually from Florida in the USA. I grew up in Ohio and just started this polar permaculture. So that's kind of how people have been finding out about me.
So polar permaculture, to put it simply, it's gardening in the high Arctic. So a lot of people are going to be thinking, surely that's impossible. How do you grow things on an island that's frozen for much of the year? So what is it you actually do?
Well, we do a lot of indoor hydroponic growing for the whole year. And then we grow outside in our dome from May until end of September. And we basically want to provide locally grown food for Longyearbyen. Everything is imported. And what we produce, we sell to the hotels and the restaurants. And then we like to collect back the waste that they don't need. And we compost that with worms. And we also have some other composting systems. And we use what we produce to grow more food. So we're trying to create like this no waste, zero waste, circular economy, whatever you want to call it. But we want to create that here in Longyearbyen.
I have to ask, why? What prompted this? It's such a unique business proposition in such a cold, inhospitable place. Where did the idea come from?
Well, I didn't start this to save the world. I didn't start this to be a hero. I'm from a foodie family. My mom and my grandmother are my biggest heroes, and they've always were about fresh. Everything had to be fresh. Fish, chicken. I mean, I remember going with my grandmother. This was like in the 80s, early 90s. We would go to this Chinese kind of butcher place and they would kill the chickens right there. And then we would take a fresh chicken that was just killed home. And this like stuck with me all of my life. And my mom, she would only eat fresh fish. We never ate any frozen fish. So for me growing up, I mean, we weren't wealthy, but we ate very, very good. And that's all I remember from my childhood is good food. So when I moved to, I first started, I was working I went to culinary school because somehow the decision came down between becoming in the construction union with my stepfather or going to culinary school. I don't know how that came about, but it just happened like that. And then I, went to culinary school and then I was, becoming a chef. And so from that, I went to the Le Cordon Bleu School in Pittsburgh. Then I went back to Cleveland. I grew up in Cleveland. I worked at some private clubs and some hotels there. And then I moved to Malaysian Borneo. And I was there teaching cooking at a cooking school and working in a restaurant there. And I was teaching English. And I did that for about 4 months. And then I saw a job that said work in Antarctica. So there was a Canadian company who subchartered Russian expedition vessels. And they were looking for international staff to work for their guests. So the crew was Russian and they took care of the ship. But we were on there as passengers and we only took care of the guest. So I was a guest on the ship. If there was any emergency, I just go to the lifeboat like any other guest. But I shared the galley with the Russian chef. So I was preparing food for the international guests and they were preparing for the crew. And I did that for 5 months. And naturally, they said, do you want to go to the Arctic? So they had one ship going to the Canadian Arctic and one ship coming to the Scandinavian Arctic. And they sent me here. So then that's how I came to Svalbard. And then I went back to Antarctica. And then I came here and I saw the Radisson Hotel. And I said, they must need chefs. So I went in there and they hired me. So I started working at the Radisson Hotel here in 2008, March of 2008.
That is quite a tale. As a travel writer, I think I've traveled a lot, but you've seen the world for sure. You've seen the world, but you've ended up in the high Arctic here in Svalbard. Obviously, you now have a business here. Your family is here. You're almost putting down roots as much as one can in Svalbard. But why have you stayed here so long?
I think my wife and I met my wife here, actually. We worked on the same ship when we both came here. And we hesitated for so long to put down roots here. We were just following the typical season is when you come in February and then you leave in October and then you travel for some months and then you come back in February, earn more money and travel. And we did that for a long time. But it was nice. It was really nice. But I didn't feel like I was getting any closer to doing what I was supposed to be doing. And then, it just kind of hit me. I always wanted to do this kind of growing and kind of living, I don't know what you would call it, but to be in touch with this natural way of kind of doing things where we grow our own food and you compost and you try to figure out how to live lightly on the land and not just buy and throw, and create all this waste. So for me, I can remember, when I was when I was going through culinary school and when I finished culinary school and started working, I would always read these homesteading magazines and permaculture things and, but the life was very different in the States. I lived in a kind of a big city. Cleveland is 500,000. It's a decent sized city, plus 1 million's over with the metropolitan area. So it was a decent sized city. And, I had to work 2.5, 3 jobs. There it's just you work. Everything is about work. And I remember on a good day for me was just to only have to work 1 job. A perfect day would be to be totally free, but that never happened. Usually you're working 2 jobs or you're working 1 job, so to be off from every job just didn't happen. So when I would have some time, for example, if I had to work 2 jobs, I had maybe 2 hours in between the jobs. One of the jobs, for example, I was a baker, overnight baker at a bakery, and then I would work the day shift at a private club as a chef. So I would have this 2 hours in between. It didn't make sense to go all the way home. And I would sit in the car and read these magazines homesteading and permaculture. And I was dreaming about going to Brazil and doing this 2-week, permaculture design course. But for me, it was like a fairy tale. I would read these science fiction novels, how can people really do this? I'm working 20 hours a day. How can I just stop and go live, in some forest somewhere and have, my own everything, meet all my own needs. So I would read it, but it was entertainment for me. And then, I could never make it work in the States for me. This American dream, I could never find it. I never could find it. And then when I came to Svalbard, that's when I've been able to do everything I ever wanted to here. I could never do it back home, but when I came here, you only work 7.5 hours a day. You make enough money. You don't have to stress. Everything is covered. You're sick. You just go to the hospital. It's not all of this stress. And then you have all of this free time. And that's when all this creativity started coming out. And I said, okay, I always loved music. I never really had time back home. Here, there was an opening for a DJ. And, I said, oh, I'll do it. And they were like, have you DJ'd before? And I was like, no. And then the manager was like, chef, DJ, what the hell? It's all the same. Give them a try. And that is Svalbard. That is Svalbard. Give them a try. Give her a try. Somebody, they let you try. So then I started to DJ. I became the DJ. And, then I was cooking. I was DJing. And then I also said, I was a head chef at the Svalbard pub. This was in 2012. And, I was just so fed up with the quality of vegetables and produce because we pay so much money. The shipping is insane, and we throw most of the food away because of the transport. It just doesn't make it. So you ship it up and I would say 30%, 40% you have to throw away.
Because as soon as it arrives.
It doesn't make it through the transport, or a few days after it arrives, it's just spoiled. You go to grab it, it's spoiled. So we throw away a lot of food here. And it's so expensive to get it here. And I said, you know what? I'm going to grow my own food. And that is how it all started. Just me wanting to have the freshest food possible.
And what was the response of the locals when you, from America, here in there's a very international community, but there are still a lot of Norwegians here. When you come along and say, I'm going to grow my own food?
I think when I first started to grow my own food, because it was more experimental, people didn't really think much about it because I was quiet, and this very Scandinavian, this jantala, this, when you stick up, they want to hammer you down. So in the beginning, I was very quiet, very under the radar. So, nobody really thought much about it. But I think once I started to make a big deal about it and say, I want to build a greenhouse and I want to have local food for the town, that's when people kind of were like, what is this about? And, who is this crazy guy and what does he want? Because that was before the dome was here, because I was only saying, I want a greenhouse, I want a greenhouse. So people thought I was a bit crazy. But then when we put the greenhouse up, it was in 2016, then first thing everybody said is, one storm, it's going to fall down. So, it was always something I had to climb over. And then after, it's been here for 3 years, now they're a bit more open to the possibilities. So it was a long road. It was a very long road. And it's still a long road because we only have temporary permission. We need a permanent home. We don't have a permanent home. There's no zoning for agriculture, really. So they have to make new rules, make new zones, make new everything. So it's like I opened a whole can of worms that made some people have to work, I guess.
Speaking of can of worms, I've just been given a tour of your lab, the indoor lab, not the greenhouse. And can you explain a little bit about how you're using worms to further your business?
So the worms, are an invasive species here. There's no worms that are native to Svalbard. So I had to get permission, and that took about 1.5 years at least to get permission. And then once we got the permission for the worms, I got some worms here, and I use them to compost because normally in Svalbard, all of the organic waste and sewage is flushed out to the sea. So I didn't think that was very smart because we ship everything out, very expensive, and then we just dump it all into the sea. So I was thinking, wow, what a waste, So I was thinking if there's a way to capture some of that. So people use worms to compost because it creates, castings, and this can be used to grow more food. So I've just been trying to think, how can I create some type of circle to cut down on all of this loss? So that's what we use the worms for. We deliver the greens to the hotels and the restaurants. We collect back. Normally what they would just throw down the garbage disposal. We say, no, please give it back to us. We give that to the worms. The worms break it down. They create castings or fertilizers, the same thing. We use that to grow out in the dome. So the dome is only for soil-based growing. And in the lab, we use hydroponics. So we need what the worms produce for the soil-based production.
I think it's fair to say, I've been here for, 2 days now. Everyone knows who you are. when I've explained I'm here as a journalist and I'm wanting to interview interesting people, you must go and see Ben up at the big purple greenhouse. Can you talk a little bit about what the community is like here?
This community is very beautiful. And I think that's why it's so difficult for us to leave, because you don't find people here who don't want to be here. You only have this group of people who are very excited, very positive. You don't find anybody who's in the middle because they all leave. This place is like it's like a special forces. The people who are here because they want to be here and they fight to be here. You have to be able to take care of yourself. If you can't take care of yourself, you have to leave. It's like Svalbard is doing everything it can to get rid of everybody. And these few people hold on, scratch and claw to stay here. So I'm one of them. My wife is one of them. Our daughter is one of them. Our family is one of them because we're here, we start to feel like the fjords are closing in, we go take a holiday, and then as soon as we leave, we all miss Svalbard. So it's like, we try to leave many times, but it's like, only affects certain people like that. We just keep running back here. So I think this is one of the best communities in the world. It's very international. You have people from over 50 different countries here. And, you still have the Norwegian culture because the laws are Norwegian, the language is Norwegian, and you still have, it's just a beautiful place, and it's very beautiful for non-European people. So that's why you have so many people who come here, and it's easy to live here. You just come, you find a job, you start working, you don't have to deal with any visas, any work permits. You want to do a business, you set up the business, you start to run it. Of course, you get the permissions, but it's like the perfect place for people.
You've outlined a lot of the attractions there, and I've spoken to some people on this trip that have just arrived in Svalbard for the first time, and they're really impressed. I mean, it's freezing cold right now. It's dangerous to walk around in certain areas. You can't leave even just 500 meters away from where we are now without a gun.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a very attractive offer with everything you've just said. What would you say are some of the downsides? So if somebody came to you and said, Ben, this is an amazing place, I'd love to live here, What's your response to them?
Definitely the housing crisis, because it's very tough for the seasonal workers to find houses now. So a lot of seasonal workers have to live in cupboards. They have to, closets. There's like 5 people to a 1-bedroom apartment. And then you have some, other government funded houses where you have 2 people to a 5-bedroom apartment. So it's like this big, discrepancy between that. And it's really tough on the non-government people that are just here working in a hotel, especially the hotel sector, the cleaning, it's very hard for people in those industries. So.
There seems to be a bit of a clash right now, since the coal mining is all but gone now, and there's this transition towards tourism, whether it's deliberate or not.
Many people would disagree with you on the coal mining being all but gone.
Okay,
the price is actually up, and so be careful to say that.
Are they ramping up production right now?
They're maintaining it. Like they could ramp it up, but they want to maintain it. So they say the price is going up, because I made that mistake before and said the coal mining is gone, and I was corrected by some miners who said no, our prices are higher now, and they're very positive about what they're doing. So please use caution when you say it's all but gone, because the mine is definitely a very important industry here, because our power plant is coal powered, and there's like 40 people working at the mine 7. That's the only one that they take coal from. And they say the numbers are up for the prices. So they're making money, and they're providing coal that gets sent to Germany, and it's used to make steel. So there's a part of it, 40% about, that's used to make power here. But the majority of the coal that's taken from here is for steel that's used to make everyday objects that we need. So, we have to be fair in how we present it.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to tourism, I think it's fair to say, certainly I've been told on this trip, that tourism is increasing. But that is presenting a challenge, an environmental challenge, a challenge for the local authorities in terms of tourists going where they shouldn't be going and getting into trouble. And of course, the number of hotels and other infrastructure that's needed for tourism. Where do you stand on this? I mean, your business makes some money from tourists, of course. You run tours of
it.
your gardening facilities here.
It's a big part of it is tourism.
Where do you stand on this balance between tourism and the environment and the infrastructure of this very fragile community?
We are actually the pioneers, because we are looking how to make the tourism really sustainable, not just to pay for some paper that says we're a sustainable organization, or to pay some money for some, certificate. We are actually working to really make sustainable tourism here. And it can happen. It can be done, but it takes everybody working together. And that's where polar permaculture comes in. Because, for example, you have over 1,000 dogs here. And the manure from these dogs is just thrown into a river. And then once it melts, it just flows into the sea. But we think that in order to make that more sustainable, that manure should be used to create energy. It could be used into a digester, or it could be used for something else. So that's where polar permaculture comes in. We're like the connection between all the other companies. And I think the challenge comes when a business only focuses on one thing. We're to do this, we do this. But then whatever comes out of that is not considered. So that's where we come in, because we can take the organic waste from one, for example, from the brewery. Now they're going to burn it. But, burning brewery waste is not the best way to deal with it. You can make soy sauce. You can do so many things with brewery waste. So we want to try to help to connect in different ways, see where the outcomes of this business could go into the incomes of another business. For example, with the cardboard, with the paper. Now we ship all of that back to the mainland, but that could be processed here. It could be used to make different things. We have horses here. There's 3 Icelandic horses. The manure, they do tours. They make money from tourism, from the tours, and then the manure just gets thrown on the side of a hill. But horse manure is very good for composting. It's good for growing mushrooms. So that's where we come in. We want to help make everything more sustainable. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
for a tourist who's coming to Longyearbyen that is listening to this, and they may be a little interested in what you're doing, you offer certain experiences and activities. You want to tell listeners a little bit about that?
It's easy to find out on our website, so polarpermaculture.com. And we have offer a variety of tours, but the most popular tour that we offer is called Arctic Farm to Table Tour. It's up to a 4-hour tour, and it starts with a city tour, but it's like from our permaculture kind of perspective. We kind of give you some background on how we see the town moving, and we go to the supermarket, we buy some food, we prepare the food together. So it's like a cooking class where the guests actually cook, and I'm like the coach. And I do the cleaning, of course, and they just cook. And then we eat together. So we enjoy the meal together. We have conversation. And then I do the cleaning after. And then I send everybody back to their hotel. So it's a really different way to interact here. And it's like home cooked food. It's not like restaurant food. So we cook the food, we eat, we provide what we have. We use what we have grown locally, which is like basil, parsley, salads. We have the microgreens. So we have a percentage from here. But our goal is to increase that percentage so that we have more and more food from here to incorporate into this cooking course. So yeah, that's pretty much what we do. And we just want to, like I said, we're going to open this zero waste restaurant. It's called The Greenhouse. And we want to do on a small scale what we would like to see for the city, where we use less single-use plastic, where we provide fresh, locally grown food, simple but elegant presentation. And we also will like compost the waste, and we would love to make biogas from the waste, the gas that could be used to cook. So we really want to try to figure out how can everything flow and move more circularly. So
Ben, we could sit and chat here for another hour, I'm sure, but I am conscious of time. I don't want to take up too much more of your very valuable time. But before I let you go, I have a few questions I ask every guest. These are just quick fire questions. What's the best thing about living in Svalbard?
The best thing about living in Svalbard is definitely the views, like, just everything you see.
And the most challenging thing?
I think the most challenging thing about living in Svalbard is the transport. Like everything you need, you have to wait. So it's really hard to plan and to organize things because everything is shipped. So.
And the very last question, your favorite spot on the island?
Oh, in the lab. I like being in the lab. So yeah.
Ben, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Yep.